what I wanted to do today was just give a brief introduction of kind of how the Office of Sustainability has arrived at this thing we call the Climate Action and Adaptation Plan. Go through a little bit of some data-based reporting that we do, and then talk about some of our progress that we've made in the last year or so, working on specific actions within the Climate Action and Adaptation Plan, or the CAP, as we call it. And then just kind of talk about a few of the more interesting, to me anyway, pieces of progress, I guess, interesting directions that I think we're moving in, and insights that I've had recently that I think are interesting. And then I doubt that that'll take me an hour, although I'm usually surprised at how long it takes me to get through things. And then really just wanted to open it up for questions. And if you got a question, I don't know if you have a protocol for doing this, but if you want to jump off mute or use one of the reactions or raise your hand, that's fine with me. So really interested in having a conversation, and with that, I'll get started. I don't have a lot of slides. I just wanted to share a few things that are new about our website. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just put the web address in the chat. I hope everybody will be able to see it there. And then I wanted to share my screen while I'm looking at the website. There's just a couple of things that I think will help me explain where I'm coming from. So click a few more buttons here. And I hope that everybody can see a bar graph that says emission reduction targets. Yeah, I see some heads nodding. So this is something that's new for us as far as displaying this information in this way on our website. And I think it helps folks who are visually oriented or data oriented really get into a better understanding of some of the numbers that we talk about. So I want to just introduce that for one, and then also if you haven't been to the new como.gov website, there it is. So in 2019, some of you may already be aware, the City Council approved our Climate Action and Adaptation Plan, and that was the result of about 2.5 years of work of members of the community that were appointed by the mayor to the mayor's task force on climate action and adaptation planning. So we generated this document with that task force, some staff throughout the city, primarily from the Office of Sustainability, but across all parts of the city as an organization. And then also we held, boy, the exact number escapes me now, is at least 3 community forums where we had pretty good participation and input from the community to try to help shape what are the priorities for us as far as they relate to climate action. And the kind of the overarching driving numbers at the top of this climate action and adaptation plan are these emission reduction targets. So those are the green bars on the right. And how we assess that is we look at reduction of greenhouse gas emissions from a baseline in 2015. So the bar all the way to the left here. And every year we do what we call a greenhouse gas emissions inventory, and we look at the different sectors of emissions from energy or transportation, wastewater, and try to assess the progress that we've made overall, and then look into that information to see where we might be seeing increases or where some of our activities might be decreasing emissions, and try to understand a little bit more about that. So during the climate action adaptation process, we started off with establishing some goals, and these were based on the best information at the time, the Paris Climate Agreement and their science-based targets, and really put us in the frame of mind that in order to to do the right thing, so to speak, we needed to reduce our emissions by 35% from our 2015 baseline by the year 2035, as indicated here, and then reduce by 2050 by 80% from our 2015 baseline. When we were in the middle of, well, it was actually probably towards the tail end of generating this report and doing this analysis, of course, the 1.5 report came out that indicated that we needed to have more aggressive and ambitious overall reduction goals. And for a lot of different reasons, we didn't go back and change our overarching goals. However, we did state in the cap that whenever possible, you know, our approach will be to make more ambitious reductions, at the most ambitious reductions possible, so that we can meet the new guidance as it emerges. And then, of course, since then, we got the red alert memo from the IPCC, and you know, our philosophy holds the same, that we need to make the most ambitious and aggressive reductions possible whenever we can, in order to meet, you know, the current guidance, current guidelines. So just kind of wanted to set that. Maybe some of your questions or interests are in the ever ratcheting down of the emissions targets, and how are we responding to that? And we just continue to try to do as much as we can, as quickly as we can. So one thing I do want to show everybody about this particular display, if you mouse over this chart and then right click on the mouse, so this little box will come up and it says show as a table. So those of you who might be more number oriented, this is a pretty straightforward chart. It's just for the goals, but it will display this information numerically. So if you want to get into the numbers a little bit more, that's available. I think that's I'm really proud of it. I'm proud of our staff for developing this, because I think it allows people to, it makes us more transparent in the information and how we present it. So let's see here. I've gotten lost in all of my windows. The next component, or the next kind of reporting I wanted to share with you all, was
Eric,
on our community.
Eric,
Question.
Sue and Herb, tell them said they have a question related to the chart. Don't mind.
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, certainly. Let's hear
Sue
it.
and Herb, go ahead.
I am the one with the question.
Okay.
And looking at the chart, it looks like we've got two 15-year periods of our goals, to our targets. And the first time we hope to get a half a million cubic tons reduced, and the second one 100. Why such a difference between those two time periods? Is it because we're going to get cars going more electric, or is there some other thing as to why we can't get the 2035 down faster?
Well, that's a good question. A lot of it is dealing with trying to get the ball rolling, I guess I would say. So once we have that momentum, it helps to drive those reductions faster. So a lot of that's certainly part of it. Market adoption of electric vehicles is going to take some time, and as well as electrification of buildings. Those are all super important pieces, and just a general, you know, market potential is going to increase when we also have new and better technologies. A lot of these future reductions are based on the assumption that we will have new, if not new, then cheaper, more readily available technologies. So I hope that answers your question.
Eric, one other question that came up in chat. You mentioned the IPCC earlier. What does that stand for?
Oh, yeah, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. So the UN organization that,
IPCC. Okay,
yeah,
thank you.
sorry. Yeah, I can veer off into alphabet soup land. So please just, call me back. Any other questions about this chart? No? All
Well,
right.
actually, I
Oh.
have a question.
Okay.
How are you measuring the emissions?
So measuring emissions happens in pretty much two ways. The first and predominant way is by looking at what we call activity information. So I'm going to click to the next section because I think it'll help me explain a little bit. But we have different sectors that we measure. And you can see down here at the bottom, those are the different sectors. So we have commercial, industrial, and residential energy. And then we have transportation and waste sectors. In the energy sectors, the way that we measure emissions is through utility data. So we're looking at primarily electricity used and natural gas used. There's also some fuel oil and other minor sources, but it's generally the same. And so we get data on how much electricity was used within the city of Columbia. And there's a few different utilities providing that electricity. And depending on what technology those utilities use to generate that electricity, they're going to have different rates of emissions. So a utility that uses a higher proportion of renewable, zero carbon technologies is going to have a lower emissions factor. So each kilowatt hour that's generated is going to emit fewer tons of carbon dioxide. So that's primarily that's how we do the energy side. Process and fugitive emissions is a byproduct of transportation of natural gas. So it assumes that there's I think it's a 0.3% leakage along the pipeline and in transfer and use of the gas. That's not reflected in the utility usage. Transportation is done, actually, we transitioned to using Google Environmental Insight Explorer. And so that they are able to give us a pretty granular idea of movement within the city. And because of their ability to know things, Google can also classify that as far as if people are walking, if they're biking, or if they're in a motor vehicle. And we make some assumptions about the number and type of vehicles, and then also the average efficiency. So then we can determine what the emissions impact is of those miles traveled based on those assumptions and that data. The waste data is from emissions from the landfill or emissions from the wastewater treatment facility. And those are done primarily through monitoring, although there are also some assumptions made based on how much trash is deposited at the landfill, and then also how much flow goes through the wastewater treatment facility. So I think I covered all of the sectors there, but that's how we monitor. So it's some direct measurement, but it's mostly based on what we call activity data. So whether that's miles traveled or electricity or natural gas used.
Thank you.
Yeah, certainly. So one thing that oh, Winfred, is that your hand raised? Go ahead if you.
Yes.
Okay.
How would you define community? How does that take in the university, for instance?
Yes, so it does. And the definition of community is a geographical definition. So it's the city limits of the city of Columbia, the municipal limits. Mm-hmm.
I see. All right. I guess
Just muted myself.
that's one of my questions.
Oh, Yeah.
I'll save the other ones till later.
Okay. All right. Yes. Catherine?
Um, I live in the county, not very far out. The city is beginning to surround everything where I live. How much does Boone Electric or the Boone County Water District do to work on these same things that the city is trying so hard to do?
I am not very familiar with what the water districts are doing. I do know that Boone Electric, as a part of their membership in, oh boy, that name is escaping me too, Associated Electric, kind of their parent organization, that they do also have portfolio, so greenhouse gas emissions or renewable energy requirements. I don't know what, I couldn't quote you their specific goals.
Well,
But
my,
overall, though, Boone Electric is, if we're just thinking about this fairly arbitrary line drawn for the city of Columbia, Boone Electric is a fairly small component of our emissions when we look at it for the community.
well, I was wondering, those of us who are still in the county still have wastewater that is not going to the treatment plant. And that's when I started to think, ooh, what is Boone County doing? So I thank you for your answer.
Oh, certainly. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you all for your questions. I'm going to continue unless someone else jumps in the next little bit. All right. So what I wanted to call some attention to our to the information here on the screen, because we see a drop here in 2020, and we're waiting on a few final and minor data points to come in before we finalize the 2020 inventory, but it's definitely close enough to make some assumptions about it. First, we've got about an 8% reduction in 2020 over 2021 total emissions. And then that's also a 12% reduction from 2015. So that's good. Reductions are good. We also need to maintain this 19 to 20 trajectory and then decrease even more. What's interesting to us about this decrease is that the largest decrease in 2020 emissions were seen in the transportation sector. We don't generally see, we have not seen changes in the transportation sector over the period between 2019 and 2015. Well, what happened in 2019 and 2020 is people didn't go very many places. I know I worked from home a lot. I didn't travel out of the county for months. So that is a significant impact that we can see in the data about how transportation and changing transportation patterns can really impact our transportation emissions. So there might be something that we can learn from that as far as what things we can keep. And so maybe these Zoom meetings will become will stay to be fairly common, and we might see changes in expectations for workplaces and things like that. So the other things that we're able to see with some of our analysis is that milder weather, so cooler summer and warmer winter, also contributed to a reduction in some of our energy emissions. And overall, we saw some reductions attributed to the water and light utilities commercial lighting incentive programs, and then overall just an increase in commercial energy efficiency. So so those are some of the high level insights that we have about our inventory in the year 2020. Claudia, yeah, I see your hand.
Hi there.
Hi.
So I know you mentioned, sorry, it's kind of loud here.
That's
You
okay.
mentioned that a lot of the reduction could probably be attributed to COVID, and how it changed people's habits and energy consumption. How, I mean, since as things maybe like open up back again, are you expecting that the decline seen in like 2019, 2020 would go back up again?
Yeah, I just want to clarify, my statement was really related to the transportation emissions. That's where we see the most significant drop. And, you know, in other communities, we've not dug into our emissions inventory yet for 2021. And in other communities, they have seen a rebound, unfortunately, in emissions. So, yeah, so I would assume that that we will see a rebound, unfortunately. Yeah.
And then another question I had was, by the time we get to 2035 or 2050, are there like consequences for not reaching those goals or anything like that baked into this plan? Or like what will happen if we're above that, or, you know?
And so you mean aside from the environmental impacts? Yeah,
Yep, aside from the environmental
okay.
impact that like most people will understand
Mhm.
who aren't as aware or like invested or, you know, believing in climate change.
Yeah. Well, you know, we have made some predictions about our vulnerability to the impacts associated with climate change, and those impacts that we anticipate are a significant increase in degrees in days with temperatures above 95 degrees. So it has a huge impact on human health. It has a huge impact on energy costs. So that can, and I think the primary impact is human health. There's anticipated to be increase in vector-borne diseases, which again, major health impacts. So things like Lyme disease, diseases carried by insects generally. You know, as we increase our pressure on environments and habitats, we're going to increase our interaction with those communities, the other natural communities, and a part of those natural communities is disease. And so we're going to see, I think that there's a high likelihood that we'll see increase in instances of disease kind of transferring from animals to people. So those are the ones that we understand now. Severe weather, so an increase in heavy precipitation events, which can have an impact on stormwater and stormwater infrastructure. Those are the ones that we have a fairly good understanding of, but all that understanding is based on climate and weather patterns in a different energy situation in the atmosphere. As we add more energy to the atmosphere, those patterns of climate and weather become less predictable because we don't have the information to base our predictions on, because it's new. It's a new situation. So beyond that, we really don't have predictions in our office, and I'm not aware of widely held predictions based on that are much different from that. So okay, I will go ahead and move on a little bit here. So I said I wanted to give some high level understanding, and I appreciate all your questions. I'm going to move forward and just talking about how the city of Columbia is implementing this climate action and adaptation plan to try to achieve some of our goals. So I can go ahead and stop my screen sharing. And the way that we're organizing ourselves is in what we're calling CAP teams. So CAP is an abbreviation for the Climate Action Adaptation Plan. And we've got 5 staff teams that are organized around clean energy, healthy housing, clean transportation, the built environment, which includes both buildings and the natural environment, and then also resource stewardship. So clean energy, of course, is largely focused on renewable electricity and achieving the goal of 100% renewable energy, renewable electricity in Columbia. Healthy housing is focused on policies and programs that can increase our supply of safe, healthy, and affordable housing in Columbia. That group had worked very closely with the Columbia Health Improvement Plan groups out of the health department. Of course, as we know, the health department had a lot of other things to work on in the last 20 months. And so some of the momentum there has slowed a little bit. But that emphasis is on energy efficiency, particularly in rental housing, and then also indoor air quality. As we get more and stronger storms and higher humidity and higher heat days, that's going to increase our potential for indoor air quality issues with mold and moisture and asthma triggers like that, things like that. The Clean Transportation Group is focusing on improving our energy and emissions in our efficiency in the municipal fleet. So looking at opportunities for electric vehicles, charging infrastructure, and then also reducing our vehicle idling in our fleet. The Good Stewards Group is the Built Environment Group, and it's kind of a pair of groups. And those groups are focusing on developing natural resources conservation plan for the city as an organization, and then on the natural resources side. And then on the building side, we have recently developed and gotten approved an energy benchmarking policy. So that'll be for all municipal buildings. We will be displaying and monitoring our energy use in those municipal facilities. We currently have about 3 dozen or so that we are currently monitoring, and then we've got a plan to get the rest of them done over the course of the next 2.5 years. So we'll be displaying, monitoring, and measuring progress towards energy reduction goals. Finally, the Resource Stewardship Group is tasked with reducing landfill waste and then also encouraging water conservation. So these staff teams, if you aren't aware, the Office of Sustainability we have a staff of 7. So we are blessed compared to a lot of other communities of similar size and even larger cities who have offices of sustainability with a staff of 1. And these CAP teams that I mentioned, those 5 different groups, are staffed by dozens of city staff. So across all different departments. So we're super lucky to have these collaborative kind of cross departmental interdisciplinary teams working on these issues. The two that I'll highlight are I've already talked about the Good Stewards Group that's focusing on municipal building energy benchmarking. That's something that we've been working on since the pandemic put us all into remote mode. So we're able to maintain momentum and keep working and meeting, and have got this policy developed. And we're going to transition now to building performance standards to try to meet our ambitious energy reduction goals for municipality. And then the other thing that I wanted to highlight is our clean transportation team. We're working hard with the support of the Climate and Environment Commission to develop a fleet electrification plan that has we haven't ironed out all the details, so I'm not going to give a lot of specifics, but the ultimate goal is to have a zero emissions fleet for the city of Columbia. So that includes the vehicles that inspectors will drive, police will drive, and then also our transit. So we're working towards developing a process that we evaluate emissions, delivery of services, total cost of ownership, a whole array of points to make sure that we can reach that zero emissions fleet. So we are on track. Last time I checked, which was yesterday, we're on track to have that policy in draft form presented to the city manager by the end of the year, so December 31st. Neither of those two things would have happened without these CAP teams, without the participation of city staff. I don't know if people are familiar with the expression of other duties as assigned, but that's exactly what these CAP teams are. These are things that sometimes the staff that are on these teams are acquainted with the technology, or it's kind of a part of their job description. Other times they just have a passion, want to try to do good to support our community, and so it's a whole range of motivations for folks being involved in these CAP teams. So like I said, none of this would be possible without without that effort. So I can pause here for a minute if anybody has any questions about those CAP implementation teams or any of the projects I just highlighted. Pam, I see you come off mute. Yeah. Oh, and Pam
Have
and
you
then
changed
Kathy.
building codes to help with this?
Currently the building and site development, community development department, they're the ones who manage the code and the code enforcement. And they are in the middle of reviewing the next code cycle. So code cycles happen every 3 years. Because of COVID and well, I think it's largely COVID, that process has been delayed by maybe 10 or so months. And so we're reviewing, the community development is reviewing the 2021 codes. And in the past, what the city has done is adopted the energy code component. So we're on 2018 of the International Energy Conservation Code. So I anticipate that we'll keep moving in that direction. So certainly a part of it, and that's a huge help to making building energy efficiency just a part of business as usual. Kathy, I saw your hand up next, and then I see Winifred.
Okay, I was wondering, does recycling fit under the good stewardship focus?
That's in the resource stewardship. So there's kind of if I had to do it over again, I wouldn't include stewards and stewardship in two different groups, but they're in the resource stewardship group. Yeah, that function. And they've been focusing on water conservation right now. And as I'm sure people on the call are aware, the solid waste utility has been facing a mighty challenge just to maintain services. So I think we all would like to see more and different progress, and that certainly is a part of what we're trying to do. But recycling is in the resource stewardship CAP team.
Thank you.
Winfred?
Two questions about your transportation, the fleet, the city fleet.
Yes.
What is the status of the fleet now? They have purchased electric cars in the past, or rather hybrid cars. There is a concern, though, about the prospect of buying natural gas, I believe, natural gas powered buses. Is that true? That's being considered?
So currently we do have hybrid vehicles. We have the electric transit buses. I'm only aware of one fully electric vehicle that's not a transit bus. And then we have gasoline and diesel and compressed natural gas currently in the fleet. There is one of the components of the fleet electrification plan is the recognition of kind of a transition approach. We would all love to be able to say, snap of the fingers, let's do electric. And certainly that is the preferred option. It's the preferred end goal. It's not always going to be the solution that or the choice that we're able to make. And what this fleet electrification policy does is it gives us a process to evaluate. And we haven't, like I said, I have not been able to, we're not all the way through that process yet. And so we can't employ it. And I think the issue that you're referring to is the compressed natural gas or the vehicle purchase agreement that was on the city council agenda a couple of weeks ago. And that allows us to get equipment using a joint purchasing agreement with the state of Washington. The CNG buses that were mentioned in that council agenda item would be replacing diesel. So as far as local air pollution and greenhouse gas emissions, compressed natural gas buses are not emissions, not zero emission vehicles. That's true, but they are vastly superior as far as emissions and local air pollution to diesel buses. So
Well, I'd have to say it's still a step in the wrong direction. I mean, I just don't understand that. I think I'm not in the city either. I'm live just outside it, but I think it's unfortunate to be spending that money because the buses will be lasting many years before they're replaced. And I guess people in the city, if they are concerned about this, should be contacting city council.
yeah, that's exactly the right approach.
I have another question I should have written earlier, which was, do you have a breakdown on emissions by source? Electricity, natural gas?
Yes. Yep. And that is in
Haven't
that
seen that chart. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't go to that particular display, but if you click through those displays, there is one in there that gives the breakdown of electricity, natural gas, and then also by electricity utility.
And does that include the emissions from the electricity that we purchase?
Yes.
That are actually sourced in other areas.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's see. Any other questions? Not, I'm gonna keep rolling here. So, one idea that we like to focus on is the idea of no regrets programs and projects. So projects that are at the same time low to no carbon, they improve energy efficiency. So things like increased insulation, reduces the amount of energy that you need to use. So any carbon that's associated with that energy production, if any, is reduced. So electrification in buildings, electrification in transportation, they can save operational costs, they can save the energy cost, reduced maintenance. We definitely see in electric buses or electric vehicles over internal combustion vehicles. They also reduce emissions locally as well as potentially regionally. And one thing that I have started to pay more attention to in our analysis is the local economic benefit of the policies and the ambitions in the climate action adaptation plan. So one of the areas where we've had the benefit of some amount of analysis is in the building energy efficiency and renewable energy in buildings. So we were able to take a look at the potential local economic benefit of those policies. And if we were to meet those goals within the scope, within the course of 10 years, those policies, however they're implemented, whether it's mandate, incentive, a combination of the two, or just the market, those policies have the potential to add between 1,500 and 2,000 jobs to our local local jobs. So they would look like jobs for engineers, analysts, HVAC technicians, installers, general construction jobs. So that's an additional number of jobs in those sectors. There are currently probably about half that many right now. So there'd be a great boom in employment. We're already lucky to have local job training efforts with Job Point and the Career Center, Moberly area community college. So lots of opportunities here locally. Also, we see a lot of synergy with this approach when we look at the READY strategic plan. They have in there a goal to increase the number of Black, women, and minority-owned businesses and entrepreneurs. So that really can provide a lot of good synergy where we're supporting our climate goals. We're providing benefit to businesses just financially, providing benefit to local folks because they're the ones doing the work. And these can be very well-paying jobs. So there's, with a lot of the other policies and longer range strategies, things like green infrastructure, energy storage installation, different kinds of landscape management approaches that are consistent with the CAP can generate local jobs, local industry, while at the same time meeting our climate action goals. So that's really focusing on, certainly there will be a cost to these programs, but there's a cost to business as usual. And if we focus on keeping those benefits local and really trying to build up our community, especially those who have been traditionally left out of economic development opportunities, that we can really start to build a more resilient and a more resilient community. So that's something that I'm excited about pressing forward more with, is really underscoring how much of benefit, in addition to all of the climate benefits that these policies can have. Let's see, what else did I want to talk about? Yeah, so, Wynn brought up her opinion that she felt like it's a step in the wrong direction to replace diesel with compressed natural gas. There are people, we hear from both sides of the story, and that's an important community conversation that we need to have. There's a community conversation, there's a technical conversation, and we have different ideas, different viewpoints, and likely the path forward is gonna happen in the middle of those two. And I am a strong believer in maintaining conversation, even when I disagree, especially when I disagree with someone. So I take that in my personal life, my professional life. And so I look forward to robust conversations about renewable energy, about development and zoning and transportation changes. There's a lot of conversation. There's a lot of real interest in making progress and doing that as a community. So I think I'll end my general comments there, and then we can just open it up for, I'm not sure how much more time we have, but for as long as we can. Yeah, Pam? Oh.
We have until 1:15.
Oh, okay. All right. Super.
I'm not sure if this is in your department, but in the spring, there was a recycling in the Hearns parking lot where you take, for instance, electric blenders that no longer work, small appliances, things like that.
Okay.
What do you know about that? I know why it didn't happen last year, but will it happen this year?
What do I know about that? I know I've had a conversation. So that is in my department. That's, if we're thinking about the same thing.
Okay.
That was through the Mid-Missouri Solid Waste Management District, which is a part of the Office of Sustainability. Somewhat. It is, it's complicated, but anyway, we talk to each other. I'll put it that way. And there will be a similar event. I think what the Mid-Missouri Solid Waste Management District is focusing on now is kind of building up some outlying communities so that when those events happen, folks don't have to drive all the way into a central location. And there should be an event for this region, for our Columbia region, to have another. Yeah, so we didn't do one or they didn't do one because of COVID and everything else, and it is a part of their ongoing plan.
Okay. Also, we used to have Fixit things at like Home Depot, places like that, and people would we could take things and have, and it was at the library as well.
Yeah.
Will those start up again?
As far as I know, that's still on their plan to work those into their programming. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Again, that's Mid-Missouri Solid Waste Management District.
Okay.
Which I think I'll look for the link to their website, and then you'll be able to get the straight.
Oh, that would be helpful.
Okay. Anybody else? Jump on in. Go ahead and, I guess, why don't I call on Sue and Herb?
Having attended to these questions for many decades, it seems obvious to me that if one is to meet the ambitious goals you have declared for 2035, much less the one for 2050, one is going to have to excite, energize, and move the great majority of individuals and institutions in this community to act starting right now, vigorously and aggressively change their ways. What are you and your staff doing to so energize and excite the citizens of this community to act?
Well, we're doing things like this, talking to folks here, letting folks know about the opportunities that are out there. We've got a lot of good engagement through our social media and with the schools. We're working with the STEM at Columbia Public Schools. We have interactions with Mizzou. So we're building an understanding of climate change and offering ways that folks can become involved. I'm also looking forward to turning the lessons that we're learning as an institution outward, to be engaging with the commercial buildings in Columbia to help with their benchmarking opportunities and efforts. I think a big part of our success is going to be our adoption of renewable electricity. And that is a huge community conversation. It's a huge technical conversation that needs to happen. And I don't doubt that a lot of you are aware. I think I recognize some of you as having attended the meeting with the Water and Light task force that's been looking at their integrated resource plan. It's a big deal. It's a big question. We all need to come together and figure out how we're going to make progress towards that goal in meaningful and rapid ways. So I'm encouraging this conversation. We need to keep talking about climate change and figuring out ways that we can, as individuals and as organizations, participate. I'll take this opportunity now to share one more thing that has been particularly helpful to me in answering the question of what should I do? What's the thing that I need to do? And it won't take me very long. I hope that you all gain something from it. And it is this. It's a Venn diagram. So this might take some of you back to school, but there's 3 circles. And we're focusing on trying to get to this middle part. What is it that I should do? What is it that my organization can do? And the first where I usually start is with joy. So joy, what is it? What brings you joy? What gets you up and going in the morning? How can you really make yourself feel alive, right? What do you like doing just as a person? And then what are you good at? Are you good at drilling down into the data? Are you good at having conversations with strangers? Are you good at fill in the blank? And then what is the work that needs to happen? Do we need to have more people becoming more involved? Do we need to have more people understanding how to grow their own garden? Do we have more people need to understand what greenhouse gas emissions are, how to ride the bus, what the benefit of fill in the blank is, and then figure out where that overlap is. And that's where you can have, or an organization can have, enduring impact. If we choose as our cause something that doesn't bring us joy, doesn't make us happy, doesn't feed who we are as people, I don't think that's a long-term solution. It isn't for me. So I just want to, maybe I'll stop with that now.
Okay, so Eric, I wanted to call on Claudia before we lose time from the Missourian. She has a question. Thank you.
Hi, the last question I had was, you mentioned that you worked for the city as a housing specialist, and you also talked about like some zoning and like housing codes. And I'm wondering if you could maybe briefly talk a little bit more about like what this intersection between like housing issues and Columbia expanding and then energy issues at the same time, where they intersect.
Okay. So briefly, housing is, well, it's important to all of us, right? Some of us are lucky enough to have our own home that's efficient. We can afford the bills. And some of us are not. A growing fraction of us are not. A key component to maintaining housing affordability is energy efficiency. How can we, so an energy efficient home is one that is inherently more affordable to those living in it. So energy efficiency directly reduces emissions. And so that's a tie to climate change. Housing affordability also impacts, logically, those who have less money to spend. There's an increasing fraction of people who are in energy insecurity as far as can they afford their utility bills on a monthly basis. So that's a big problem, and it's more prevalent, like I said, in folks who have lower incomes. Climate change and the reasons why, a lot of the reasons why we are where we are as far as increasing emissions and climate change are the same reasons why we have inequities in our systems. Climate change is being brought about by extractive histories, and it's the same or similar forces that have, like I said, led to inequality and inequity. You asked also about development. As we push further and further out, I mentioned this earlier, we're reducing, we're increasing our interaction with natural communities. We should all be comfortable interacting in nature, but what I'm saying is as we start to pressure those natural communities, that's reducing their ability to survive and thrive, and our survival is related to those natural communities for the pollinator habitat that they provide, for the carbon sequestration that trees and prairie plants provide, for the impact to stormwater, for the cooling effect that natural green areas have on our environment. So as we push into undeveloped lands, undeveloped spaces, we're reducing our resilience as a community. So that's briefly, and I'm sure inadequately addressing that. I mean, it's a central and huge component to climate change, to equity, to community resilience. So.
Like we have a couple of other questions. Catherine Allen and Kathy Jensen have their hands raised.
I'm afraid mine is a downer. It is to me, but we're doing all we can to reduce polluting the air, and it absolutely must be done. But all these batteries that will be used and the device that I am now speaking to you on require rare earth minerals, and the mining that's going to occur is going to start polluting too, primarily water. And that's coming, and I won't be here, but generations are going to have to be aware of that. I think of my dad, who was happy to see the automobile as a young man because it got rid of all the horse manure that was on the streets. And now we're going to get rid of the CO2 with electrification and all the other things you've mentioned. But as a member of the Friends of the Boundary Waters Canoe Wilderness area, I'm very aware of what a Chilean mining interest is trying to do to that area. And it will, as they say, oh, it'll bring mining jobs. Well, guess what it's going to do? It's going to kill all the guides the people who guide fishers and the people who bring all kinds of tourist income to that area. So it is a downer. I won't be here, but I see it coming. And I thank you I thank Columbia and the people who are on this drive that we do need to keep aware. And I appreciate all the programs that you're doing and others here in the city. Here, now I'm done.
Kathy Jensen?
My question was regarding training for the jobs that will be coming. I was wondering if there's any interfacing with the unions because of they have apprenticeship programs and so on.
Yeah, so unions and organizations that have they're kind of high road contractors that have standards, labor standards, and work standards, so quality work standards are going to be central to this, or ensure good, well-paying jobs that protect workers' rights and ensure that we get the quality that we need out of things. Yeah, certainly. When?
I was surprised that you haven't mentioned the raft of programs, energy conservation programs originally initiated by Water and Light that do offer incentives for all the citizens to put in to get loans if needed for conservation measures, for putting in energy efficient appliances. It seems that more effort needs to be put in to advertise these and take it to the neighborhood groups, which are have their own little organizations. That's another place to be pushing individual efforts for the housing improvements you're talking about.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned those programs. When I was an energy educator, that was my job, to promote all those programs, and they've done a wonderful lot of good for some people in the community. Largely, that's folks who can afford it. Sadly, the folks who can't afford their energy bills are also those folks who can't afford those very same programs. So that's unfortunate. That said, they've done a remarkable job of reducing the amount of energy that's consumed in some homes in Columbia. I think there's a lot of good that we can learn from those programs, and they should, I hope that they will be able to evolve with the times, for sure. I'm glad you brought those up. Yeah, for certainly. The more people that know about them, the more people will be able to see if they can use them. Yeah, for sure.
I was glad to hear that you're adopting the latest national energy standards. That's terribly important for new construction.
So they're reviewing the most recent one. I anticipate that those will be adopted because they have been the last 2 or 3 code cycles, but it's not been done yet. Yeah, but they were starting the process. There was a huge slowdown in just trying to get the books to review the code. So we're starting that process, but yeah, it's hugely important, without a doubt.
All right, I think we're out of time. Eric, I want to thank you so much for being here with us today. Appreciate it. It's great to have your knowledge and sharing that and taking the questions. Do remember to change give the host back to Pam.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. And everyone, please join us again next week, where our speaker will be Nick Noth, who's one of the candidates, I think the only candidate I'm aware of, but for Boone County Presiding Commissioner. So that's next week. Again, the meeting I'll officially close the meeting now because I need to slip out. But if y'all will stick around and visit, or if Eric has more time.
David,
Yes.
there is another announcement. Kip
Kendrick is announced for mayor.
Okay,
No,
I had not heard that.
presiding commissioner.
Commission. Cool. All right. Well, I'm expecting to get
And
him.
I'm in communication with Kip. He'll probably be speaking to us in January.
Great.
Good. All right. Thank you. All right. Well, I'm going to have to drop out. I'll see you all next Friday. Take care.